Galactic slavers took a human diplomat hostage. Earth answered with a ninja. The galaxy was not always a safe place, and Ambassador Elias Rowe knew it better than most. He had spent decades walking the corridors of power, negotiating between worlds and smoothing conflicts that had lasted centuries. But nothing in his experience could have prepared him for what happened on that quiet morning in the Galactic Council chambers. Elias had been summoned to a standard meeting with representatives from several neighboring star systems. The Council, a massive construct of floating stations and diplomatic ships, gleamed under the soft light of a nearby binary star. It was a place of ceremony, of careful words, and of politics conducted with an elegance that humans often struggled to match. He had always respected the decorum, the subtle power plays that could make or break alliances. But that day, the council was not calm. There was tension in the air that went beyond politics. Something had changed. Before he could take his usual seat, alarms began to ring across the council floor. Red lights flashed. Holographic displays flickered and then stabilized, showing scenes that would make even the most seasoned diplomat shiver. On one of the large screens, Elias saw a ship approaching Earth sector. It was not just any ship. It was a Krasari slaver vessel. Their ships were massive, jagged structures built for intimidation and control, often holding thousands of prisoners from conquered worlds. Elias had studied them, known them, feared them, but never thought he would meet them face to face. The council members reacted quickly, but their motions were ceremonial at best. They were used to words, to debates, to threats carried out through votes or sanctions. They were not ready for violence. A holographic voice echoed across the chamber, deep and metallic, with the weight of authority that left no room for negotiation. "Ambassador Elias Rowe of Earth," it said, "you are now our prisoner. Any attempt to rescue you will result in the destruction of your home planet." The words hung in the air, sharp and terrifying. The council representatives froze. Some whispered to one another, while others immediately began debating responses. Elias, though, remained calm. He had spent years in tense situations, and he had learned the first rule of survival in the galaxy. Panic never helped. The Krasari were skilled. They had anticipated the council's hesitation, counting on fear and protocol to do their work for them. Within minutes, the slaver ship fired a silent beam, and a section of the council's outer defenses collapsed. It was precise, measured, terrifying. Before anyone could fully react, a transporter beam enveloped Elias. He felt the familiar but unnatural pull of molecular relocation, and then the world shifted. When his feet finally touched solid ground again, he was no longer in the gleaming chambers of the council. The air was thick and heavy, tinged with a scent that was not of any world he had known. Shadows moved across the walls of the massive chamber he had been transported into, and figures emerged, their forms strange, twisted, and undeniably threatening. The Krasari had taken him, and there was no doubt they were a species that thrived on fear. Elias quickly assessed his situation. He was alone in a chamber that seemed to float in a dark void, surrounded by the slavers' sentries. They were armed as expected, their weapons advanced and cruel. Yet as he looked around, he noticed something else. The structure itself, the way the lights fell and the shadows shifted, almost seemed alive. It was as if the ship itself was a fortress built to disorient and intimidate any prisoner. And yet he remained calm. Back on Earth, the news hit like a shockwave. The council broadcasted the message of the hostage-taking, and within hours the entire planet knew. Humans reacted in a mixture of fear, outrage, and determination. Unlike many other worlds, Earth had no massive fleets stationed in the nearest sectors, and their technology was not at the level of the Krasari. The galaxy might have expected them to negotiate, to plead, to comply. But humans had a history of being underestimated, and history, as always, had a way of surprising everyone. In a hidden facility deep beneath Earth's surface, far from public scrutiny and even from most of Earth's own government, a single message appeared on a secure console. It was brief, direct, and chilling. "Retrieve the diplomat, no trace, live extraction, handle as you see fit." The message went to a place that most humans had forgotten existed, a facility where operatives trained for the impossible. There, in the darkness, moving like a shadow, was Kaito Ren, a human unlike any the galaxy had encountered. He was a man trained in silence, in movement, in anticipation. Where others relied on fleets, armies, and firepower, Kaito relied on himself, his wits, and his body. To him, the galaxy's rules were suggestions, easily bent or ignored. Kaido's training had been rigorous, relentless, and secret. He had mastered every form of combat known to humans, but more importantly, he had mastered stealth, strategy, and observation. He could disappear in plain sight, move through enemy territory without leaving a trace, and turn fear into a weapon. And now, the galaxy was about to witness his skills firsthand. He received the coordinates, the details of the Krasari fortress, and the profile of Ambassador Rowe. Everything was precise, calculated, and terrifying in its simplicity. The mission seemed impossible on paper, yet Kaido accepted it without hesitation. Failure was not an option, for him, for Earth, and for the man whose life depended on his success. As Kaido prepared, the human diplomat struggled to understand his captor's intentions. The Krasari spoke in their harsh, guttural language, one designed to intimidate, to assert dominance. Elias listened, not just to the words, but to the cadence, the pauses, the confidence and hesitation within them. He realized the Krasari believed humans were weak, that they could be manipulated through fear. And in that belief lay an opportunity. Back on Earth, the nation did not mobilize massive fleets or weapons of war. Instead, they acted silently, deliberately, and efficiently. Every move was designed to maintain the illusion of helplessness, to ensure that the Krasari underestimated the humans' true strength. Kaido slipped into hyperspace aboard a small, unmarked vessel. It was fast, silent, and untraceable. He had no backup. He had no support. The galaxy would see nothing, expect nothing, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Every plan he had relied on precision, timing, and the psychology of fear. He understood that the Krasari's arrogance was their greatest weakness, and he intended to exploit it fully. Inside the slaver fortress, life continued under a rigid structure of control. The Krasari had perfected the art of intimidation. Every prisoner, every soldier, every crew member moved according to fear and habit. Elias noticed the small details, the way guards shifted when they thought no one was watching, the way the crew avoided certain corridors, the subtle signals of tension and suspicion among the Krasari themselves. And then it began. The first signs of disruption were subtle. Lights flickered in areas that should have been stable. Sensors momentarily failed. Guards found themselves in wrong corridors, doors they thought locked opened without explanation. Small incidents at first, easily dismissed. But then the tension grew. Fear, confusion, and paranoia spread among the Krasari like wildfire. Elias watched as the captors he had once feared began to hesitate, to doubt. And he understood something humans had long known. Fear could be turned into a tool, even against the strongest of enemies. Yet he could not act. He had to wait to survive and to trust that someone was coming. Kaido moved silently through the shadows of the fortress, studying alien patterns, exploiting weaknesses. He left no trace, but his presence was felt. It was in the misstep, the shadow that flickered where none should be, the sudden sense of being watched. The Krasari began to whisper, to suspect, to fear a force they could neither see nor understand. Time passed differently inside the fortress. Hours became long, filled with uncertainty and tension. Elias endured, observing, learning, and waiting. He had been trained for diplomacy, for negotiation, for crisis management, but never for this. Yet he adapted. The human mind, he realized, could survive even when the body was confined. It could strategize, plan, and endure. Meanwhile, Kaido continued his silent advance. He was not just moving toward the diplomat. He was moving through the Krasari's entire system of control, understanding it, bending it to his will. Every movement was calculated. Every step created an opportunity. Fear was the weapon, humans were underestimated, and Kaido was the instrument of Earth's subtle, terrifying answer. As the sun rose on distant worlds, the galaxy remained unaware of what was about to unfold. The Krasari believed they controlled the situation completely. They were wrong. Humanity had sent one of its finest, one who needed no fleet, no armies, and no warning. And the galaxy, for the first time, would see that humans were capable of acts no one had imagined. Elias, unaware of the human moving through the shadows, felt a strange mix of fear and hope. He did not know how long the mission would take, only that someone from Earth had accepted the impossible. That knowledge, faint and almost unreal, gave him the strength to endure. The hours of captivity became bearable, filled with the quiet anticipation of rescue. And in the darkness of the Krasari fortress, Kaido Ren moved like a shadow, a ghost, a single human with the skill, courage, and focus to defy the expectations of an entire galaxy. The first part of the mission had begun, silently, invisibly, and with a force the Krasari would never see coming. By the time they realized what was happening, it would be too late. Humanity was answering, and it did not answer with fleets or threats. It answered with a ninja. The Krasari fortress was a city of steel and shadow, floating in the emptiness between stars. From the outside, it looked like a jagged crystal, dark and sharp, a structure designed to intimidate every eye that fell upon it. Inside, however, it was a maze of corridors, elevators, and chambers built for efficiency and control. Every corner had a sensor, every hall had guards, and every prisoner was under constant watch. Yet in this seemingly perfect system, a single human moved unseen. Kaido Ren moved through the fortress like a shadow that the light forgot. Every step was deliberate, every breath controlled. He had studied the station's schematics, memorized the patrol patterns, and understood the psychology of the Krasari captors. Their arrogance was as strong as their technology, and humans had always been underestimated by the galaxy's elites. Kaido intended to use that underestimation to its fullest. The first few hours were simple observation. Kaido watched from darkened maintenance shafts, noting which guards were disciplined and which were careless. He saw patterns of fear and overconfidence. Some officers relied too much on sensors, others assumed that their strength alone was enough to control captives. Even in a species as disciplined as the Krasari, weakness could be found if one looked carefully. Meanwhile, Ilia's row had begun to notice small, strange things. Lights flickered for no reason. Security doors slid open when no one was near them. A guard would suddenly appear distracted, glance over his shoulder, and tense. The diplomat had faced crises before, but never like this. He began to sense that something, or someone, was inside the fortress, something the Krasari could not see. The human mind, trained for problem-solving and strategy, began to calculate. If this was the case, could rescue be closer than he had dared hope? Kaido's strategy relied not on brute force, but on manipulation. He moved silently through corridors, leaving no trace, but the Krasari were already reacting to his presence. A minor delay here, a sensor failing there, a guard losing confidence, small things that would grow into fear. Kaido understood that fear could destabilize an entire system if applied carefully. It was not enough to sneak through. He had to make the Krasari doubt themselves, their technology, and their control. He started with minor sabotage. Communications lines were subtly rerouted, lights flickered in key corridors, and door locks failed at random intervals. No guard could see him, but all felt the effects. Panic spread in tiny increments. Officers began to question their instruments, whispering to one another about malfunctions. Some thought they were being observed by an unknown species. Others feared a revolt from the prisoners. Kaido let these doubts fester and grow. In one corridor, a Krasari officer, confident in his superiority, advanced with a group of guards to investigate a sensor anomaly. Kaido used the shadows to approach silently from behind. Without touching them, without a weapon fired, the guards began to panic. One slipped, knocking over equipment. Another froze, convinced an invisible assailant was near. The officer tried to regain control, shouting commands, but the fear had already spread. Kaido retreated into the darkness before anyone could see him. No one was injured, yet the ripple of terror would last hours. Ilias noticed the change immediately. The guards in his sector began to act strangely, their coordination faltering. He could see tension in their movements, the way their eyes darted nervously. It was subtle at first, but unmistakable. Humans had a way of exploiting such details, and Ilias recognized the work of someone with extraordinary skill. It gave him a glimmer of hope, though he did not yet know who it was. Kaido moved deeper into the fortress. He avoided the main patrols, slipped past locked doors, and utilized every shadow, ventilation shaft, and maintenance hatch. The Krasari were thorough, but he was methodical. Every move he made was part of a larger plan, not just to reach the diplomat, but to turn the captors' own systems and fears against them. As he advanced, he observed other prisoners. They were from countless worlds, many of them broken by fear, injury, or despair. Kaido did not interfere with them. Yet, first, the diplomat had to be reached. Still, he took careful note of the prisoners' conditions, understanding that a later distraction could leverage their presence to sow further chaos. Kaido discovered the Krasari command center by tracking movement patterns and listening carefully. He watched officers and sentries make small mistakes, each one feeding the next. The fear he was planting had begun to cascade. A single security officer doubted his sensors, whispered warnings, and in moments the command center was filled with confusion. Reports conflicted. Orders were delayed. Panic, subtle but effective, spread like wildfire. The diplomat's cell was in a heavily guarded section, designed to be isolated and impenetrable. Yet Kaido found a small ventilation duct leading to the holding area. It was narrow, claustrophobic, and fraught with danger, but he did not hesitate. Every movement was precise. He crawled silently, the metal of the shaft cold against his palms, listening to the faint sounds of guards moving above. He knew that one wrong step could end the mission before it began, but confidence and preparation guided his actions. Finally, he reached the cell area. From his vantage point, he observed the Krasari who guarded it. Two officers were stationed outside, armed with advanced rifles designed to incapacitate any human. Kaido assessed them. One was vigilant, the other distracted, tapping on a device. He used this to his advantage. Creating a small, silent disturbance elsewhere, he drew the attentive officer away, leaving only the distracted guard. A simple maneuver, yet the effect was monumental. Inside the cell, Ilias Rowe noticed the brief distraction. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet enough for him to sense something changing. His guard's confidence wavered. It was the first real sign that he might not be alone, that rescue could be possible. His mind raced, recalling tactics humans had used in hostage situations, always relying on patience, observation, and timing. He stayed calm as he had been trained, waiting for the moment when the opportunity would appear. Kaido exploited every weakness. He bypassed the electronic lock on the cell with a device designed to manipulate alien circuitry. It was silent, precise, and invisible to the Krasari systems. The lock disengaged without a trace. Kaido moved in, his presence still undetected by the slavers. He was a shadow, a ghost in the fortress of fear. When he finally reached the diplomat, he whispered only a single sentence. "I am here to take you home." Ilias could not see him fully, only glimpses of the figure in the shadows. Yet it was enough. Human ingenuity and bravery had reached him through the darkness. The moment of despair that had weighed on him for hours lifted slightly, replaced by cautious hope. Kaido guided Ilias through maintenance corridors, avoiding patrols and cameras. Every step was calculated, every movement measured. They passed guards who were tense, distracted, and increasingly fearful. The fear Kaido had sown had weakened their coordination. Officers questioned orders, scanned areas obsessively, and began to suspect one another of sabotage. The fortress was beginning to collapse from within, not because of weapons, but because of the human mind at work. Along the way, they encountered minor obstacles, locked doors, unexpected patrols, and malfunctioning equipment. Kaido navigated each challenge with skill, using shadows, timing, and distraction. He moved silently, often appearing only in glimpses, always staying ahead of the Krasari. Ilias followed closely, trusting the human who seemed more like a phantom than a rescuer. They paused briefly in a small, abandoned storage area. Ilias finally asked the question he had been holding back. "Who are you? Are you from Earth?" Kaido's eyes glinted in the dim light. "I am the answer," he said simply and continued moving. Words were unnecessary, the mission demanded action. The Krasari, meanwhile, were beginning to realize something was terribly wrong. Officers whispered to one another about malfunctions, anomalies, and impossible occurrences. Some believed a ghost had entered the station. Others suspected that humans had finally unleashed an advanced weapon. None of them suspected a single human moving with unmatched skill through their fortress. As they advanced, Kaido created small diversions to further destabilize the enemy. He used electronic devices to trigger false alarms, causing patrols to rush in wrong directions. He manipulated lights and sensors to make corridors appear blocked or dangerous. Fear grew, amplified by confusion and distrust. The Krasari were trapped in their own fortress, victims of a mind they could not see, a force they could not comprehend. Ilias noticed every subtle detail. Guards were losing focus, machinery seemed unreliable, and the very air of the station felt uncertain. For the first time since his capture, he believed in rescue. The human mind, he realized, was capable of extraordinary things, especially when guided by skill, courage, and patience. Kaido led him through the final stretch of the maintenance corridors, moving closer to the edge of the fortress. Every moment counted. One mistake could be fatal, yet Kaido's confidence never wavered. The mission had been meticulously planned, every detail accounted for, and the enemy had no idea how underestimated they truly were. Finally, they reached a point where Kaido paused. From this vantage, the outer hull of the fortress was visible, and a narrow escape route awaited. Ilias could see the stars, distant and calm, through a small maintenance hatch. Freedom was close, yet the danger remained immense. Kaido studied the final patrol patterns and whispered, "Stay close, one step at a time." Ilias followed silently. His trust in the human before him was complete, born from observation, instinct, and the subtle signs of skill and courage. Together, they moved through the final corridor, every motion precise, every breath controlled, and every heartbeat counted. The Krasari fortress, once impenetrable and feared, was beginning to collapse from within. Fear, confusion, and doubt spread faster than any weapon, and all the while, one human moved like a shadow, unseen, unstoppable, and utterly human. For the first time, the galaxy would begin to understand that humans were not weak, that their ingenuity, patience, and courage were forces that could not be ignored. And though Ilias did not yet see the full scope of what had been set in motion, he knew one thing: Earth had sent someone extraordinary. And that someone would change everything. The corridors of the Krasari fortress echoed with tension, the kind that could be felt even through walls and doors. Kaido Ren moved silently beside Ambassador Ilias Rowe, their steps barely audible over the hum of distant machinery. Every corner they passed, every shadow they used was calculated. Kaido had learned long ago that in a place like this, a single misstep could be fatal. But he was not merely moving. He was orchestrating a collapse from within, a subtle war of fear and doubt. Ilias followed closely, trusting the human who seemed to glide like a shadow along the walls. He had been trained in diplomacy, in negotiation, in the power of words. Now he watched the power of human action at work, and it was astonishing. Each flicker of light, each hesitation of a guard, each malfunctioning device was no accident. Kaido had engineered it, and the effect was terrifying. The Krasari were beginning to unravel before they even realized it. The first major obstacle appeared as they reached the command hub's outer corridor. Two heavily armored Krasari officers patrolled the area, their weapons scanning in arcs that should have left no gaps. Yet Kaido had anticipated this. He activated a small device from his belt, a precise electromagnetic pulse tuned to interfere with Krasari tech. The lights in the corridor flickered, sensors momentarily spiked and failed, and one officer's rifle powered down for a fraction of a second, long enough for Kaido and Ilias to slip past undetected. Inside the command hub, chaos was quietly spreading. Reports came in of system failures, alarms triggered in impossible locations, and guards questioning the loyalty of one another. Kaido had left subtle traps earlier. A sensor recalibrated to show movement in one area while no one was there, a locked door that could only be opened from the inside, and faint but persistent signals suggesting sabotage. The Krasari had trained for every known attack except one, human ingenuity. As they advanced, Kaido paused to observe. Ilias noticed his calm demeanor, the way he could assess danger without hesitation. "How do you do it?" the diplomat asked quietly, voice barely a whisper. Kaido did not answer. Some things were better shown than explained. Action, he believed, spoke louder than words. Every movement, every calculated risk, demonstrated the kind of human determination that had made Earth feared and respected across the galaxy. Their path led them through a section of the fortress filled with cargo bays and storage rooms. Kaido used this to his advantage. Stacked crates and equipment became cover, allowing him to manipulate guards' patrols. He triggered minor disturbances, rolling crates, shorting lights, and even creating small sounds that drew attention away from their true path. Fear spread among the Krasari like an invisible poison. Officers began to second-guess their orders, whispering to one another and questioning every routine they had followed for years. Ilias watched it all with awe. He had been trained to recognize subtle cues, to understand when an opponent's mind was cracking under pressure. But he had never seen it on this scale. The Krasari were disciplined, experienced, and ruthless, yet they faltered under the pressure of something they could not see. Kaido's methods were elegant in their simplicity. Use the enemy's strength against them, manipulate their fear, and move with precision. Reaching the final corridor before the holding cells, Kaido crouched low and signaled for Ilias to do the same. They peered around the corner. Two guards blocked the path, heavily armed and alert. Above them, surveillance drones hovered silently. It seemed impossible to pass. Yet Kaido's mind worked quickly. He activated another device, a small emitter that projected a phantom movement along the wall behind the guards. The officers turned instinctively, rifles following the false motion, while the drones adjusted their scans to investigate the anomaly. In that instant, Kaido dashed forward, pulling Ilias along. They moved faster than the eye could follow, slipping past the distracted guards and into the narrow maintenance hatch leading to the cells. The guards recovered moments later, but it was too late. Kaido and the Diplomat had vanished into the shadows, leaving confusion and frustration in their wake. The cell was just ahead. Ilias could see it through the small observation slit. The Crusari had not expected anyone to reach it, certainly not a single human navigating the fortress undetected. Kaido crouched beside the door, studying the lock and the surrounding security measures. It was advanced, far beyond standard human design, yet not impossible. With a few precise movements, he bypassed the mechanism, opening the door without triggering alarms. Ilias felt a surge of hope. For hours, fear had weighed on him, yet now he realized he was not alone. The human beside him moved with confidence, purpose, and an understanding of danger that was both terrifying and reassuring. Kaido gestured for him to enter the cell, and Ilias stepped inside, finally face to face with his rescuer. The man's features were hidden in shadow, but his presence radiated competence and calm. The moment they were together, the fortress seemed to react. Alarms blared in distant sectors, but none were triggered by them. Sensors recorded movement that wasn't there. Guards panicked at shadows that had no source. Kaido had orchestrated it all, turning the Crusari's own systems against them. It was a subtle psychological warfare that relied on fear rather than bullets. Inside the cell, Ilias whispered, "You're incredible. How are you doing this?" Kaido did not answer with words. Instead, he gestured for silence and led Ilias through the narrow passageways that bypassed the main corridors. Each step was measured, every movement silent. Outside, the Crusari were beginning to question everything they had believed about control and strength. They passed additional obstacles, sealed doors, patrolling officers, and surveillance drones. Kaido neutralized each challenge with precision, using shadows, timing, and minor electronic interference. He did not fight. He avoided confrontation, allowing fear and confusion to do the work for him. The fortress, once a symbol of absolute power, was crumbling quietly under the weight of a single human skill. Ilias could not help but marvel. He had dealt with hostile species, tricky negotiations, and life-threatening crises, but nothing like this. Kaido moved like a force of nature, unseen yet undeniable, shaping events without leaving a trace. It was a kind of power humans rarely needed to display, but when they did, it was formidable. As they neared the outer hull of the fortress, Kaido paused again. A final set of guards blocked the path to the maintenance hatch that would lead to freedom. They were alert, heavily armed, and confident, but confidence, Kaido knew, was fragile. He activated a small device that emitted low-frequency vibrations, subtle enough to trigger unease in the Crusari. The officers hesitated, their instincts telling them something was wrong, though they could not see what. In a blink, Kaido moved. Using the guards' hesitation, he slipped past them, pulling Ilias along. The outer hatch was within reach. Beyond it, the cold expanse of space promised freedom, yet danger still lingered. One wrong move could mean death, yet Kaido's confidence never wavered. Every calculation had been made, every risk assessed. Humanity's ingenuity was about to prove itself once again. Reaching the hatch, Kaido engaged a magnetic lock override, opening it without triggering alarms. The stars stretched before them, distant and serene. Freedom was almost at hand. Ilias took a deep breath, feeling the weight of captivity lift slightly. He had survived this far because of the skill, determination, and bravery of a human who had entered the fortress alone. But the mission was not complete. Kaido knew the Crusari would eventually discover the breach. He had moments, perhaps minutes, to get them out before the fortress sealed every exit. Moving quickly, he led Ilias into the small space between the hatch and their extraction point. They would need to navigate a narrow space that would take them away from sensors and patrols, a final challenge before escape. The corridor was tight, forcing them to move in single file. Every sound had to be controlled, every breath measured. Kaito's presence remained a guide, a constant assurance that every step was planned, every danger accounted for. The diplomat followed without hesitation, trusting completely in the human who had become both protector and guide. As they advanced, Kaito whispered, "We are not done yet, stay alert." His words were quiet but firm, a reminder that even the final steps could be deadly. Elias nodded, understanding the gravity of each movement. The human mind, he realized, was not just capable of resilience, but of brilliance in the face of impossible odds. They reached a maintenance elevator that would take them closer to the outer hatch. Kaito manipulated the control panel with subtle gestures, overriding the system silently. The doors opened without sound, and they stepped inside. The elevator descended smoothly, taking them toward freedom while the Krasari scrambled above, unable to comprehend the invisible force that had penetrated their fortress. Minutes felt like hours as the elevator moved. Every second counted. Every moment required focus. Elias felt a mix of fear and awe, knowing that their survival depended entirely on the human beside him. Kaito moved with calm precision, a blend of patience, skill, and instinct that made him seem almost otherworldly. Finally, the elevator reached the level just below the outer hull. Kaito led Elias through the final hatch, careful to avoid sensors and patrolling guards. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, a promise of freedom and safety. The fortress, once an unassailable prison, had been infiltrated, manipulated, and challenged, not by fleets or armies, but by one human and the power of his mind and skill. Elias looked at the expanse of space before them. Hope returned fully. He had been taken hostage by a species that had crushed countless worlds, yet here he was, moving toward freedom because of a human who operated outside the rules of conventional warfare. Humanity, he realized, was capable of extraordinary things. Not because of technology, not because of numbers, but because of courage, ingenuity, and determination. Kaito glanced at him, expression hidden but intent clear. "We move carefully from here," he said. "The fortress is still dangerous, but they do not know we are this close." Elias nodded. Every fiber of his being trusted the human beside him. The final steps toward the stars awaited, and with them, the beginning of the end for the Krasari's illusion of control. Fear, confusion, and human skill had already begun to reshape the fortress. The galaxy would soon see that humans were not to be underestimated. One man, moving like a shadow, had already proven that. And as Kaito led the diplomat toward the final exit, the first signs of the Krasari's collapse began to ripple through the fortress. Guards turned on one another in confusion. Systems malfunctioned. Doubt spread like wildfire. The human mind, operating at its peak, had turned a fortress into chaos without firing a single shot. Elias felt the thrill of hope, the power of belief in human ingenuity, and the certainty that survival was not a matter of strength alone, but of intelligence, skill, and courage. The mission was far from over, yet the first stage of victory had been achieved. Humanity had answered not with armies, but with a single human whose actions would echo through the galaxy. The stars outside the Krasari fortress stretched endlessly, cold and distant, yet full of silent promise. Kaito Ren led Ambassador Elias row through the narrow space just beneath the outer hull. Every step they took was precise, controlled, and deliberate. The fortress above them was a labyrinth of danger, patrols, and surveillance. One wrong move would mean capture or death, yet Kaito moved like he had done this countless times before. Elias followed silently, every instinct focused on survival. He had been a diplomat for decades, used to navigating tense situations with words, but now he witnessed the raw effectiveness of human skill in action. There was no negotiation here, no debate, only precision, intelligence, and courage. Kaito had turned fear into a weapon, manipulating the Krasari without them realizing it. As they moved along the hull, Kaito paused for a moment, his sharp eyes scanning the corridors and patrol routes above. "The main exit is heavily guarded," he whispered. "We will not take the obvious route. They expect us to run straight into their hands. We will go another way." Elias nodded, trusting the human completely. The calm, confident presence beside him was unlike anything he had experienced. Kaito directed him toward a small maintenance hatch that led to an access corridor running along the outer edge of the fortress. The corridor was narrow, barely wide enough for two people to move single file. Lights flickered unpredictably, and occasional sensors swept the path. Kaito paused, observing the rhythm of the sweeping beams and the patrols moving below. He calculated the timing with precision, waiting for the perfect moment. When it came, he moved like lightning, slipping past the sensors and leading Ilias into the corridor. The patrols below were close enough to see, yet far enough away not to detect them. Kaito relied on silence and shadow, understanding that in the Krasari mind, what could not be seen could not be fought. Every step was deliberate, every motion measured. The corridor twisted and turned, leading them to a small airlock that opened into the outermost section of the fortress. Here, the danger increased. The guards were not just vigilant, they were desperate, sensing that something unseen was disrupting their control. Kaito paused to scan the area, observing every movement, every subtle signal of panic. Then, with a controlled movement, he activated a small device that emitted a subtle low-frequency pulse. It was enough to unsettle the guards, to make them hesitate, to shake their confidence. Ilias watched, amazed, as Kaito manipulated the situation without touching a weapon. The guards fumbled, their coordination faltering, and in that moment Kaito moved. They slipped past the officers and into the airlock, which led to a narrow passage that connected to the fortress's exterior maintenance routes. The cold void of space stretched ahead, but safety was within reach. Yet danger still lingered. Kaito knew that the Krasari would soon discover the breaches and the anomalies he had created. They would send patrols, they would investigate, and they would strike back. The key was speed, precision, and anticipation. Every moment counted. As they moved along the exterior passages, Kaito explained the plan in whispers. There is an observation deck ahead. It is lightly guarded because the Krasari do not expect anyone to reach it from this side. From there, we will use a small shuttle to escape the fortress entirely. Ilias listened carefully, absorbing the details. The plan was simple in concept but required flawless execution. One mistake, one misstep, could cost them their lives. The observation deck was not far, but the path was treacherous. They had to navigate along a narrow ledge, with the vacuum of space on one side and the fortress walls on the other. Sensors were embedded along the walls, and patrols moved periodically. Kaito timed their movements perfectly, slipping past each obstacle without leaving a trace. He moved like a shadow, silent, unseen, unstoppable. When they reached the deck, Kaito paused to observe. The Krasari guards were focused on their routine, confident that no one could reach this point. He activated a small device that caused a subtle vibration in the deck's structure, enough to create the illusion of movement elsewhere. The guards' attention shifted, and Kaito led Ilias to the shuttle waiting at the edge of the deck. The shuttle was small, designed for stealth, but fast and reliable. Kaito opened the hatch silently, motioning for Ilias to enter first. The diplomat obeyed, heart pounding with relief and anticipation. Kaito followed, and the hatch closed behind them. Inside, the shuttle hummed quietly, systems ready for departure. Ilias looked at Kaito, searching for words, but found none. The human beside him had accomplished what seemed impossible, infiltrating an enemy fortress alone and reaching him without detection. Kaito initiated the shuttle's engines, keeping the craft aligned with the fortress's shadow to avoid detection. Outside, the Krasari fortress loomed large, jagged, and menacing. Patrols moved across its surface, but none noticed the small craft slipping away in the shadows. Kaito's skill and planning had turned fear into a weapon, and now it carried them to freedom. As they moved away from the fortress, alarms began to sound in distant sectors. The Krasari had discovered the anomalies, but it was too late. The shuttle moved swiftly, guided by Kaito's expertise. He had calculated every vector, every speed, every angle to avoid detection. The fortress, once an unassailable prison, now seemed almost helpless. Ilias finally spoke, breaking the tense silence. "You're incredible," he said quietly. "How did you do all of this?" Kaito's expression remained calm. "Patience, observation, and understanding your enemy," he said simply. "The Krasari rely on fear to control. I use it against them. They do not expect humans to act this way." The shuttle navigated the final stretch of the fortress's outer perimeter, moving toward a pre-programmed jump point. Kaito activated the hyperspace drive, the engines humming as the craft prepared to slip into the stars. Behind them, the fortress continued to buzz with confusion. Guards turned on one another, alarms blared, and systems malfunctioned. Kaido had left a trail of psychological chaos, ensuring that the Krasari would never forget this day. In the shuttle, Elias allowed himself a moment to breathe. He had been taken hostage by one of the galaxy's most feared species, yet now he was moving toward Earth, alive and safe, thanks to a single human. He realized that the galaxy had underestimated humanity. Humans did not always need fleets, weapons, or armies. Sometimes one person acting with intelligence and courage was enough to challenge the strongest of foes. Kaido watched the stars, eyes sharp even in the quiet of the shuttle. The mission was not over. They had escaped the fortress, but they were still in Krasari-controlled space. Any detection now could bring pursuit, and the slavers were relentless. Yet Kaido's calm, methodical mind had anticipated every step. He plotted a course that would take them through unmonitored sectors, using the shadows of space to avoid sensors and patrols. Hours passed in tense silence. Elias marveled at Kaido's focus. The human beside him moved with purpose, every decision deliberate, every action precise. It was a display of discipline and skill that few species could comprehend. Humans, he realized, were capable of extraordinary things when their ingenuity and courage were fully unleashed. Finally, the shuttle emerged from the most dangerous sectors and entered a region of space monitored only lightly. Kaido allowed himself a small sigh, though his eyes never left the navigation systems. Freedom was closer, but vigilance remained essential. The Krasari could still pursue them, and their ships were fast and lethal. Yet Kaido had anticipated this, creating contingency plans that would allow them to evade any immediate chase. Elias looked at the human beside him, admiration and gratitude mixing in his thoughts. "I don't think I have ever met anyone like you," he said softly. Kaido gave a faint nod, acknowledging the praise without arrogance. "We do what must be done," he replied. "Earth does not send threats lightly, and we do not fail our people." The shuttle continued its journey, moving silently through the stars, a small vessel carrying two humans who had defied expectations. Behind them, the Krasari fortress remained in chaos, its systems and personnel disrupted by one human who had turned fear into a weapon. The galaxy, unaware of the events unfolding in that fortress, would soon learn that humans were not to be underestimated. As the shuttle approached a safe distance from Krasari-controlled space, Kaido initiated the final jump sequence. Hyperspace opened before them, the stars stretching into lines of light as the craft prepared to leave the sector entirely. Elias felt a surge of relief and awe. He had survived captivity, witnessed the power of human skill, and seen firsthand the ingenuity that could change the course of events. In those moments, the galaxy remained unaware that its perception of humans was about to shift forever. A single human, operating with skill, courage, and intelligence, had challenged one of the most feared species in existence and succeeded. The story of this mission, though silent now, would echo through the minds of those who survived, planting seeds of doubt and respect that would shape future interactions. Kaido monitored the systems, ensuring the hyperspace jump was precise. The shuttle moved steadily, leaving the dangerous sector behind. The Krasari could not follow immediately, and by the time they realized what had happened, the humans would be long gone. Every calculation, every movement, every decision had been flawless. Elias turned to Kaido one last time before the jump. "Earth sent you for me," he said, "but you've done more than rescue me. You've shown me the truth about our species." Kaido nodded slightly. "The galaxy underestimates humans," he said quietly. "We do not always fight as they expect. We adapt, we endure, and when necessary, we act decisively. That is how we survive." The shuttle entered hyperspace, leaving behind the chaos of the Krasari fortress. The stars outside stretched into ribbons of light, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, both humans allowed themselves to feel a sense of safety. The mission was far from over. The Diplomat had to return to Earth, and the Krasari would eventually seek answers. But the first stage had been a complete success. In the silence of hyperspace, Elias Rowe reflected on everything he had witnessed. The galaxy had assumed humans were weak, that we could be controlled, intimidated, or ignored. Yet here, in the vast emptiness between stars, one human had proven them wrong. Intelligence, courage, skill, and determination had triumphed over brute force and fear. Kaido sat quietly, eyes scanning the instruments, mind already planning for contingencies. The fortress was behind them, but the mission demanded vigilance until Earth was in sight. The galaxy had begun to learn a lesson it would not soon forget: underestimate humans at your own peril. The stars stretched on, calm and endless. Yet in the shadows of space, the impact of one human's actions radiated outward, setting the stage for a new understanding of humanity's strength, courage, and ingenuity. The Crasari fortress, once a symbol of terror and control, had been infiltrated, manipulated, and challenged, not by an army, not by fleets, but by a single human moving with precision, intelligence, and unwavering focus. Freedom, finally, was within reach. And the galaxy would soon hear whispers of the shadow that had struck fear into one of its most feared species. A single human had changed everything. The shuttle glided silently through the stretch of hyperspace, the distant stars elongating into lines of light, as if the universe itself was stretching to witness the human ingenuity unfolding within. Kaido Ren sat at the controls, his eyes scanning every instrument, every readout, every tiny anomaly. Beside him, Ambassador Elias Rowe allowed himself the first true breath of relief he had taken in days. Freedom was close, yet both knew the journey was far from over. Earth sector grew nearer on the navigation display, a small blue and green jewel suspended in space, distant yet tangible. The diplomat stared at it, thinking of everything he had endured: the cold uncertainty of capture, the oppressive presence of the Crasari fortress, the skill and courage of the human who had infiltrated it alone. Kaido had accomplished what fleets and armies could not. He had moved silently, manipulated fear, and brought him home without a single casualty. Kaido spoke softly, almost to himself. "We are not safe until we are in the gravity well of Earth. Sensors, patrols, and pursuit crafts will still be scanning the sector. The Crasari may realize what happened and attempt interception." He did not sound worried. He rarely did. The calm in his voice was not arrogance. It was confidence born of preparation, skill, and an understanding of every variable at play. Elias nodded. He had faced threats from countless alien species, yet he had never encountered a human like Kaido. He could see it now in the quiet efficiency with which Kaido operated. Patience, observation, and intelligence could defeat brute strength and fear. Humanity, he realized, carried a power that few species truly understood. The first sign of pursuit came as distant sensor readings flickered. Crasari detection drones were in the vicinity, scanning hyperspace paths and monitoring for anomalies. Kaido's hand moved over the controls with precision. "We will not fight them directly," he said. "That would be reckless. Instead, we will use shadow paths, unmonitored channels, and misdirection. They will not see us until it is too late." The shuttle veered slightly, slipping into a corridor of hyperspace that appeared empty to the scanners. It was a technique that few humans had mastered, relying on instinct, calculation, and subtle manipulations of navigation and energy output. The drones swept past, scanning hundreds of light-years of space, yet failed to detect them. Elias felt the exhilaration of the impossible. Humans were underestimated at their peril. As the shuttle continued its course, Kaido monitored every reading, every alert, every faint blip on the sensors. He anticipated every possible movement of the Crasari, every reaction to their presence, and every possible risk along the route. Elias watched, fascinated, as one human orchestrated what seemed like an entire fleet of tactics using only his mind and skill. It was elegance in motion, precision without waste, and courage without hesitation. Hours passed, yet the tension never fully eased. The Crasari were persistent, intelligent, and relentless, but Kaido's planning had accounted for this. He had predicted patrol patterns, sensor intervals, and even likely escape calculations. The shuttle moved like a ghost through the void, visible to none, unstoppable to all who assumed humans were merely fragile creatures. Elias broke the silence at last. "You've done this alone, haven't you? No support, no backup fleets?" Kaido's eyes did not leave the instruments. "Humans are underestimated," he replied. "We do not always need fleets or armies. Sometimes one skilled individual, acting precisely and without hesitation, is enough." The statement was simple, but the weight of it resonated deeply. Humans had survived, thrived, and shaped the galaxy for millennia, often because they could adapt and act in ways others could not imagine. The shuttle emerged from hyperspace, entering the outskirts of Earth's territory. The sight of the home planet, familiar and vibrant, brought a new wave of relief to Elias. He realized how close he had come to losing everything, and how one human had turned the tide entirely. Kaido guided the shuttle through the final sectors of patrols, using decoys and energy shadows to mask their approach. Even the most advanced detection arrays could not anticipate his tactics. As the shuttle descended toward Earth's orbital station, Kaido prepared for the final stage, docking and debrief. "We will approach the station quietly," he said. "Minimal communication. We do not want unnecessary attention. The Krasari could still be tracking us, and I will not take risks unnecessarily." Elias nodded. Every action of the human beside him had been precise, calculated, and life-saving. He trusted him completely. The docking procedure was flawless. Kaido maneuvered the shuttle through the station's approach corridors, bypassing routine inspections and communicating silently with the automated docking systems. Within minutes, the small craft was secured and the hatch opened. Earth personnel, briefed on the mission and awaiting his return, rushed forward to escort Elias to safety. The diplomat barely had time to breathe before he was surrounded by colleagues, yet he only had eyes for Kaido, the man who had made this impossible rescue possible. Kaido stepped from the shuttle last, scanning the station as he moved. Despite the apparent safety, he remained alert, aware that threats could arise even in familiar territory. Humans had survived by being vigilant, adaptable, and intelligent. Kaido embodied all of these qualities. Elias finally spoke, his voice thick with gratitude. I do not know how to thank you. You have saved not only me but also Earth's honor. The galaxy thought us weak, but you've shown them the truth." Kaido's expression remained calm, but Elias could sense the quiet pride that emanated from him. "We do what must be done," he said. "That is enough." The galaxy underestimates humans because it fears their unpredictability. That fear is part of our strength. News of the rescue spread quickly, though the details of Kaido's methods remained classified. The Krasari, humiliated and confused, began questioning their own capabilities. How could a single human infiltrate a fortress, manipulate fear, and return a hostage without detection? The incident reshaped the galaxy's perception of Earth. Diplomats, leaders, and military strategists across countless worlds began to reconsider the underestimated humans. The seed of respect, and perhaps caution, had been planted. Back on Earth, Elias briefed the Council and High Command. He spoke of the rescue, the precision, the ingenuity, and the courage displayed by a single human operative. "This is what humans are capable of," he said. "Not only resilience, but strategy, adaptability, and intelligence beyond what other species assume." The galaxy has learned a lesson today. His words carried weight, not because of fleets or weapons, but because of the undeniable effectiveness of one human acting with skill and purpose. Kaido remained in the background, observing quietly. Recognition was unnecessary. His mission was complete. He had proven that humans could challenge even the most feared species in the galaxy, not with overwhelming force, but with intelligence, courage, and adaptability. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and that mistake would be remembered. In the following days, Earth received encrypted messages from distant sectors of the galaxy. The Krasari were in disarray, their operations disrupted, their confidence shaken. Other species whispered of humans in ways that they never had before. Stories circulated quietly about one human who had turned fear into a weapon and defeated an empire's elite guards without a single casualty. The legend of Kaido Ren had begun, though only a few would ever know the full truth. Elias met with Kaido one final time before the diplomat returned to his official duties. "You have changed everything," Elias said. "Earth, the galaxy, they will not forget this." Kaido's expression remained calm, his voice steady. "Humans are underestimated because we adapt, endure, and act decisively when necessary. That is all anyone needs to know. The galaxy will learn eventually." Elias nodded, understanding more than words could express. Humans were not merely survivors. They were innovators, warriors of thought and action, capable of feats that others could not comprehend. One human had challenged the Krasari and succeeded. That was a message the galaxy could not ignore. The Krasari fortress remained behind, isolated and disrupted. Its reputation for invincibility tarnished, it became a cautionary tale for those who assumed superiority over humans. Fear, misdirection, and intelligence had defeated brute force, and the galaxy began to realize that humanity's strength lay not just in technology or numbers, but in cunning, courage, and creativity. As Elias prepared to continue his diplomatic duties, he reflected on the events that had transpired. A single human had infiltrated a fortress, manipulated fear, navigated countless dangers, and ensured his survival. Humanity had been underestimated, yet it had triumphed. The galaxy had witnessed only a fraction of what humans could achieve. Kaito returned to the shadows, his work done but his presence a constant reminder of what humans could accomplish. The galaxy had learned a new lesson: never underestimate the unexpected, never assume humans are predictable, and never believe that fear alone could control them. Intelligence, courage, and skill were enough to defy the strongest adversaries. Elias looked out at the stars from the Earth station, reflecting on the journey. He had been taken hostage, trapped in a fortress he had feared to imagine, and rescued by one human. The galaxy would change because of this, beginning to recognize the strength that humans carried within themselves. One person had shifted perception, challenged assumptions, and ensured that Earth's honor remained intact. The galaxy remained vast, dangerous, and filled with uncertainty. But humanity had proven something crucial. No matter the threat, no matter the odds, humans could act decisively, intelligently, and bravely. And that truth, demonstrated by one extraordinary human, would echo through the stars for generations to come. For Kaito Ren, the mission was complete. For Elias Rowe, survival and gratitude were intertwined. For Earth, the galaxy had been reminded that humans were not to be underestimated. And for the universe, the lesson was clear. When a human acts with skill, courage, and intelligence, even the most feared species could be challenged and defeated. The stars stretched endlessly before them, calm yet full of promise. Humanity had shown its strength, and the galaxy had begun to take notice. One human had altered the course of events, proving that courage, intelligence, and determination could change the fate of worlds. And as Earth rotated quietly beneath the void, one human had become a symbol of what humans could achieve when underestimated, proving that the galaxy would never forget the day a single operative rescued a diplomat from the most feared slavers in existence.